The village that disappeared overnight. There are places hidden from the world. Places where maps end. Places people are told never to visit. And somewhere deep within the frozen mountains, beyond forests so dense sunlight barely touches the ground, there once existed a village called Velmora. Today, no official map shows its location. Most people believe it never existed at all, because one winter night, every person living there vanished without a trace. And the only thing left behind was a message scratched into a chapel wall. We heard them calling. Chapter 1, The Lost Village. Velmora was small. Only 47 people lived there. The village rested high in the mountains, isolated from the outside world by thick forests and steep cliffs. Most villagers were hunters and farmers. They lived simple lives. No electricity, no modern roads, no contact with nearby cities unless supplies were needed. To outsiders, Velmora seemed peaceful, but locals from nearby towns avoided speaking about the village after dark. Because for generations, stories surrounded the forest. Old stories. Stories about whispers echoing through the trees during winter nights. The elders believed the mountain itself was alive. And sometimes, it called to people. Children were warned never to wander outside after midnight. Hunters refused to enter certain parts of the woods. And whenever strong snowstorms arrived, families locked their doors before sunset, because according to legend, that was when the voices became strongest. Most people dismissed the stories as superstition, until January 16, 1987, the night Velmora disappeared. Chapter 2, The Storm. That winter was colder than usual. Snow covered the mountains for weeks. Roads became nearly impossible to travel. On the evening of January 16, a violent storm struck the region. Winds screamed through the forests. Snow buried the narrow mountain paths. Nobody could leave, nobody could enter, and according to reports from nearby towns, something strange happened shortly after midnight. Several people claimed they saw lights moving through the forest surrounding Velmora. Not ordinary lights, dozens of them, small glowing figures drifting silently between the trees. Some believed they were lanterns carried by travelers. Others insisted the lights moved unnaturally fast. Too smooth, too silent. One old man later claimed the lights were moving uphill against the storm, without leaving tracks in the snow. No one dared investigate. By morning, the storm had ended, and Velmora was silent. Chapter 3, The Discovery. At sunrise, a supply driver named Elias arrived at the village entrance. He immediately sensed something was wrong. Normally, smoke rose from the chimneys by early morning. Children played near the center well. Dogs barked the moment strangers approached. But that morning, nothing moved. No smoke, no voices, no sound at all, only wind. Elias called out several times. No answer came back. The silence unsettled him, but he entered the village anyway. As he walked through the snow-covered streets, fear slowly began to grow inside him. Every house stood open. Doors swayed gently in the freezing wind. Inside the homes, meals still rested on tables. Bowls of soup sat untouched. Candles had melted completely where they once burned. Beds remained warm beneath heavy blankets. It looked as if the villagers had abandoned everything in the middle of ordinary life. As if they had all suddenly stood up and walked away at the exact same moment. But what terrified Elias most was the snow. Fresh snow covered the entire village. Yet there were no footprints leaving the area. Not a single trail. 47 people had vanished, without leaving one mark behind. Chapter 4, The Message. Panicked, Elias ran toward the old chapel at the center of Velmora. The building stood older than the village itself. Its wooden walls were dark with age. The chapel door creaked open slowly. Inside, the air felt strangely warm. Rows of empty seats faced the altar. and scratched into the wall behind it was a message, deep enough to expose the wood beneath, written in uneven letters. "We heard them calling." Elias later told investigators the message looked rushed, almost desperate, as though whoever wrote it was terrified. He fled the village immediately. Authorities arrived the next day, but the mystery only deepened. Chapter 5: The Investigation. Police searched the region for weeks. Search dogs tracked nothing. Helicopters found no signs of survivors. No bodies were ever discovered. No blood. No evidence of violence. No signs of struggle. And still, no footprints. Investigators became obsessed with the impossible detail. If the villagers had left during the storm, there should have been tracks everywhere. But the untouched snow suggested something impossible. Almost as if the people of Velmora had simply disappeared. Rumors spread quickly. Some believed a cult had taken them. Others suspected mass hallucination. A few whispered about government experiments hidden within the mountains. But locals believed something far older. They believed the forest had finally answered. And Velmora answered back. Chapter 6: The Recording. 3 years later, a hiker exploring the abandoned mountain road discovered a damaged cassette recorder buried beneath snow and dirt. Most of the tape was ruined, but investigators managed to recover the final 30 seconds. The recording began with heavy breathing, then footsteps crunching through snow. Wind roared loudly in the background. And then, a frightened voice whispered, "Do you hear them?" Several seconds of silence followed. Then the voice spoke again, this time trembling. "They're in the trees." Suddenly strange sounds echoed across the tape. Low distant whispers, too distorted to understand. Then the voice screamed one final sentence. "Don't let them." The recording ended abruptly. No one ever identified the speaker. Chapter 7: The Final Secret. Not long after the cassette became public, government officials sealed the entire region. Road signs disappeared. Maps changed. Records connected to Velmora became impossible to find. Even photographs from the investigation vanished from archives. Officially, the village never existed, but people living near the mountains still tell stories during winter storms. Stories about lights moving through the forest after midnight. Stories about whispers echoing between the trees. And sometimes, travelers passing near the old mountain road report hearing voices calling their names from deep within the darkness. Soft voices, patient voices, waiting voices, and those who follow the sounds are never seen again. Ending. So if you ever find yourself alone in the mountains, and you hear something whisper from the forest, do not answer. Because some legends are not stories. Some legends are warnings. Subscribe to ShadowLore for more dark mysteries.